Welcome. Let's talk about mental health. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if the root of every single mental illness wasn't a chemical imbalance or even past trauma, but something way more fundamental, just the way we think? Today, we're diving into a really radical idea that reframes mental health, not as some destination you arrive at, but as a universal journey that every single one of us is on. And our guide for this whole trip is the psychiatrist M. Peck. All the big ideas we're going to get into today come from his landmark book, The Road Less Traveled. And look, this is a book that has really challenged millions of people to look deeper into what personal growth and even spiritual development are all about. And here it is. This is his central and pretty provocative claim. Peck basically says, I've come to believe that all psychiatric disorders are thinking disorders. I mean, that's a huge statement, right? It goes against a lot of what we think we know. So what on earth does he actually mean by that? Let's get into it. Okay, to really get this, we have to kind of shift our perspective on all those familiar psychological conditions. Peck isn't saying that traditional diagnoses are wrong or that they should be thrown out. Not at all. He's asking us to look underneath them, to see the flawed patterns of thought that he believes are the real source of the problem. And he makes this idea super clear with examples right from his own practice. For instance, a narcissist. Their entire world just revolves around them, right? That's a failure to think about other people. Or think about an obsessive-compulsive person who gets totally lost in controlling every tiny little detail. That's a failure to see the big picture. And then you have passive-dependent people who just can't bring themselves to think for themselves. You see, each one, at its very core, is a specific breakdown in the process of thinking. So, if mental illness starts with this disordered thinking, where does that thinking even come from? Well, Peck traces it all the way back to a really basic choice, a choice we all have to make whenever we run into pain or problems in our lives. Peck's starting point is really simple, and you've probably felt it. Life is difficult. It's just one problem after another that needs to be solved, and the process of actually solving them, well, it's painful. It brings what he calls legitimate suffering. Now, this isn't some pointless pain. It's the discomfort that comes with growth, and it's the absolute starting line for psychological development. And this right here is the crucial point. When we try to dodge that legitimate suffering, we don't actually escape pain. No way. We just trade it in for something else. Peck, quoting the legendary Carl Jung, says we create a neurosis, basically an unnecessary suffering that ends up becoming a much, much bigger problem down the road. So, you can really see the two paths laid out here. It's a fork in the road we face all the time. Path 1, you confront your problems. It's going to lead to that legitimate suffering, but the result is real personal growth. Path 2, you avoid your problems. That leads to what he calls neurotic suffering, which stops our development in its tracks and, according to Peck, actually forms the very foundation of mental illness. So just take a second and be honest with yourself. In your own life, when a big problem pops up, what's your gut reaction? Is it to lean into the discomfort of solving it, or do you start looking for an escape route? Which path feels a little more familiar? Now, this tendency we all have to avoid legitimate suffering, this core mistake in our thinking, it usually shows up in one of two major ways. Peck calls them disorders of responsibility. Okay, so first up is neurosis. This is when a person avoids the real problem by just taking the blame for everything. Anytime there's a conflict, their default thought is, it's got to be my fault. They shoulder way too much responsibility, and that creates its own special kind of suffering. And then you've got the total opposite, the character disorder. This person avoids responsibility by blaming everybody and everything else. When there's a conflict, their automatic thought is, it's the world's fault, it's not me. They see themselves as a permanent victim of things happening to them. You can see the contrast so clearly here. They're just two sides of the same coin, right? Two opposite failures in thinking about responsibility. The neurotic person is always tortured by, I should have done this, or I ought to be better. The person with a character disorder is defined by, I can't because of this, or I have to because of them. Both are just clever, subconscious ways to avoid the legitimate pain of figuring out what you're actually responsible for. So, if that's the problem, what's the way out? What's the solution? Well, Peck frames the entire human experience as one single lifelong journey. The journey out of our own built-in narcissism. Okay, get ready for this, because this next idea is a big one. Peck says we are all born narcissists. And it makes sense, right? As a baby, the world literally revolves around your needs. He argues that the entire job of growing up, of becoming a mentally healthy adult, is the long, hard process of learning that other people are real and that their needs matter too. It's the journey of expanding our thinking beyond just ourselves. Now, a critical part of this journey involves something Carl Jung called meeting the shadow. Your shadow is basically all the parts of yourself you'd rather not admit exist. Your flaws, your selfishness, your failures. To grow, you have to be willing to look at that stuff. In fact, Peck goes so far as to say that refusing to confront your own shadow, to see your own capacity for being imperfect, is the very root of human evil. So here it is, the whole path laid out. Peck calls it psychospiritual because he sees this whole thing as both a psychological healing process and a journey of spiritual growth. It starts with that infantile narcissism we're all born with. Then life throws problems at us, and we have that choice: confront them or avoid them. If we choose to confront them, it forces us to develop consciousness, to meet our shadow and take real responsibility. And this isn't a one-and-done deal. It's the ongoing work of a lifetime. And that's really the ultimate takeaway from all of Peck's work. Mental health isn't a place you get to. It's not about being happy all the time. It is the process. It's the continuous, courageous, and, yeah, often painful work of choosing to face reality and grow from it, day in and day out. So let's just quickly bring it all together. Peck's big argument is that we can see mental illness as a thinking disorder. This disorder comes from our choice to avoid the legitimate suffering life throws at us. That avoidance then creates these disorders of responsibility, either neurosis or character disorder. And the only real path to health is the lifelong journey of consciously growing up and moving beyond our own natural narcissism. We'll leave you with this final thought, which really gets to the heart of Peck's work. If real growth only comes from confronting the painful problems that are in our path, what is the difficult truth, the legitimate suffering that your life is presenting to you right now? What is your journey asking you to face?